Hello and welcome to installment 39 of the r/Civ Battle Royale, written by Knight of Nye and narrated by Burgerkrieg. Today's title card is vertical, which I find highly irritating, but it is a great poster. Credits go to Marmota Bobak for this beautiful piece of artwork. Check out the map after part 38 and commend our map makers Cylon L and Laxarax Auroskull and all of their helpers for a job well done. As was mentioned on r/Civ Battle Royale earlier this week, a staggering 67 total cities flipped over the course of the last part, by far the most in the history of the Battle Royale, so they had their work cut out for them. It's hard to imagine anyone other than the Burr powerhouse sitting atop the power rankings once again. Depending on how the Grand War in the Pacific goes though, we may end up with another challenger once more. The full power rankings can be found on r/Civ Battle Royale. Speaking of which, we begin with a nice shot of southern Australia, where the Wobbegong and Kimberley armadas are squaring off. Unsurprisingly, the central Kimberley cities are taking significant damage, but the Red Fort's bonus is meant for situations like these. If the Kimberley can pull more destroyers around, see the left edge of the screen, they will likely be able to hold off the Aussie naval invasion. Those land units are scary though, especially escorted by Bob Hawke. Why they're taking a leader to the front lines is something only the Aussie AI knows. Medan and Geelong have already flipped, something these cities in our world's Indonesia will likely do many times this part. Both powers have huge air forces shelling all fronts, so regardless of who comes out on top, if anyone, all sides will take terrible losses. Could this be the opportunity for the Maori, Hawaii or even Sri Lanka to make some serious ground? And here we see the northern front. Cebu is about to flip, Iloilo has taken damage, and Manila seems firmly Aussie, for now. There are a few Blackfoot peacekeepers in the region though, taking away valuable surface area for ships to hang out in. It's worth noting that Maria the Lazy has denounced the Inuit. Don't you have enough problems back at home, Maria? A slightly different view of the same region, centering more on the former Champan cities. Don't get caught up in the Aussie-Viet Kimberley war hype to forget that the Trung sisters are still at war with Champa, who can absolutely take a nice bite out of some of those unprotected embarked units. Also in the slide is the knowledge that Benito Juarez has reached the modern era. If he has oil, this means planes are likely quick to follow. Speaking of Maria, she loses Rome back to Sparta. The backdoor privateer capture works wonders for the second time in less than 5 turns, and with only one privateer and a galleass even able to deal damage to the city, it looks likely to stay Spartan for a while. That being said, Sparta is getting their teeth kicked in everywhere else. Gustavus Adolphus is stomping through the formerly Spartan territories in Eastern Europe. The former Byzantine cities that make up the Spartan core would be quick to follow. Personally, this is one of the most surprising wars yet. Sweden and Sparta were fairly close before the war, but the regal lions have made the Spartans look like roadkill. Wow, look at that buccaneer fleet. The pirates have absolute regional supremacy in terms of navy, in a region that is thousands of miles from their capital. They're now sporting battleships, which I'd personally rather be planes, and have modern infantry and could pick literally any nearby civ, save maybe Iceland, to plow through next. Morocco seems nice and juicy, especially for that great lighthouse in Marrakesh. Since the last shot of the winter war between the Inuit and Canada/Texas, I believe 4 cities have flipped or fallen back into Canadian hands. Yankton is back in Inuit hands, but one has to question whether the Inuit have bitten off a little more than they can chew. All of this being said, they've already claimed 7 cities off of Canada, a very nice outcome to any war, but when you've got infantry against riflemen, you'd expect more. In a rare show of competence, or just a classic show of how having planes gives you a ridiculous advantage, Brazil is brutalizing Argentina. If it weren't for the fact that La Rioja is deep in the Andean mountains, I'd say Argentina might be gone before this part is over. They're desperately making peace with enemies all over the world, but the one looming threat will not go away. Bidyadanga has already flipped once, and will likely do so at least once more. This outdated Wobbegong armada is fairly low on health though. Planes plus destroyers will make quick work of all these privateers. However, they have to find a way to stabilize the ground forces, and using pikemen is not the solution. The Kimberley are coming out ahead on the Indonesian Isles, taking back Medan and having a gigantic naval presence. However, they need their core far more than they need these one-pop fringe cities. Speaking of their core, here's a good shot at a huge number of Aussie melee units rolling across the outback. Jandamara does seem to have similar tech for his ground units, sporting Great War infantry here, but he just needs more of that. Again, the Red Fort will be crucial here to keeping the Kimberley cities in their hands. Vietnam uses the tried and true tactic of throwing a great musician at an opposing force in an early form of creed bombing. One can only imagine this musician is Scott Stapp himself. In other news, Cebu has fallen to Australia, but their navy is beginning to look rather thin. There are almost as many Blackfoot units in this slide as Aussie ones. Where are they going? Sparta finally shows some teeth and flips Ohrid back to their side, but there are so many more Swedish ground units here than there are Spartans, so it will likely flip back in short order. At the same time, Maria looks like she might be able to flip Rome once again, creating yet another distraction for Leonidas. Speaking of distractions, that's a nice army you've got over there, Napoleon. Ever thought about maybe using it? Buccaneer infantry fighting against Portuguese galleasses seems like a microcosm of this war. Maria is about to find herself in the Galleria of Deadness, at the hands of a foe whose capital is across the world. I'd say I was surprised, but this is Maria the Lazy we're talking about. Back to the outback, where Bindian Daga flips once again. Kunmunya is in the deep red, and somehow Junjuva is completely untouched, though it has been citadeled into oblivion. Where are all of your planes, Jandamara? None of those planes are over here, but there is a superior naval force instead. Destroyers against privateers and caravels is a clear edge, and it looks as if Jandamara is shuttling down more ships from Indonesia to help out. They've got a tall road ahead of them, but it is very interesting how the Grand Wobbegong Armada is outmatched, while the Aussie ground invasion forces are the ones carrying the day. Cebu falls, and Vietnam also looks extremely thin in terms of their available units. They have only a very small handful of planes, and while Viet Congs are fantastic at dealing with units and moving through jungles, don't forget they can't capture cities. They do appear to have horses though, so both lancers and cavalry can do this job as well as melee naval attack vessels. Eventually, some narrator will stop harping on this, but it is so damn important. Suddenly, out of absolutely nowhere, a massive Kimberleyan army sprouts out of the ground. The Australalians look absolutely dominant on the ground just a few slides ago, but now all of that is being called into question by this wave of Great War infantry that crawled out of the sand. On top of that, the Kimberley Navy is absolutely dominating the Wobbegong. Destroyers completely wreck caravels, privateers and frigates, and that is the matchup that we see predominantly down by the minimap. That ring of caravels does absolutely nothing against that lone destroyer, holding out like a champ. Even more gains here for the Kimberley, taking Orange while not losing any of their own cities. Weren't there supposed to be submarines in the Wobbegong Armada? If so, where are they? That's about the only unit I can see turning the tides here, other than even more planes. This is really an impressive turnaround by Jandamara. We'll see if he can keep it up. Here we have both fronts of the Inuit Wars of North America. The Ice Sheet fleet isn't quite doing its job on holding Victoria, but they do seem to have a firm grasp on Oyupe. Yankton is besieged by cannons, but only has one melee unit in the vicinity, and Charlottetown and Regina are both likely to fall this turn. Canada's core is beginning to take damage from the Snowstorm Air Force. If the Inuit can break through Quebec City decisively, I fear it's all over for Lester B. Pearson. A quick look at the relatively quiet northeastern front of the Inuit Wars. These frigid cities have flipped a couple of times thus far, but are in control of Canada now. A Buccaneer Corsair takes full advantage of its unique ability to ignore enemy borders and takes a quick peek at another extremely successful war. The minimap shows that the Bucks have not taken the rest of Iberia as of yet, but perhaps we shall see that happening soon. Remember that time when Argentina had cities and was relevant? Me neither. What's for certain now is that they're down to one city deep in the heart of the Andes. Thanks to planes, Pedro can go after it if he chooses, but it may not be worth the warmonger penalty to do so. Eva Perón is on her deathbed, and considering half of her land are mountains, she might as well be dead. In other news, it appears that Chile has submarines. They could continue to hold Vitkos while the Inuit take 4 cities, with the turn that was resolving in the previous slide. Here is a shot of the suddenly icy blue cities all across North America. Quebec City is down to 0 health, with a couple of melee units on its doorstep, and a motherfucking bazooka staring at the Canadian forces. Of course, this begs the question: nukes? It says heavy breathing here, I don't know. This is what the slide says, don't fucking blame me if that sounds creepy. Go blame the guy who wrote it, okay? I'm just the guy. You know, this is not me. There's a lot going on in this slide, so I'll go through everything briefly. Ohrid is back in Swedish hands, while Kumae is taking damage, from planes most likely. Rome is in the deep red, but none of Maria's units seem to be nearby. This may be the last shot of Israel we see in this battle royale. Prepare your Fs. The Ayyubids are somehow still hanging on against a vastly superior force in both tech and size. Proletariat Cossack, you are badly needed in the Carthaginian, or maybe Carthaginalian camp, ASAP. As a pile of Stalin ships get deposited in the Mediterranean Sea, presumably from the closing of borders, the Bucks continue their charge at Coimbra, the current seat of Maria the Lazy. She stares wistfully out the window, admiring the effort of Henry Morgan, vowing to do the same with the Portuguese tomorrow. In other news, Vitkos flips back to the Inca. Despite Mexico recently entering the modern era, Kamehameha is not to be deterred and redoubles his efforts to take Merida back into the Hawaiian Empire. Considering how few Mexican ships there are, and how few melee units appear to be in Benito's empire, this future city capture could stick for a while. Maria has been ejected completely from Iberia, having only the 2 one-tile island cities of Goa and Funchal and the former Nazi city of Cologne left in her empire. It's hard to imagine any of these cities falling to the Bucks in this war, but then again, who really imagined that Henry Morgan would take Porto and Coimbra? The Bucks smell blood in the water, abusing their Corsair's ability to pay Cologne a visit. I wonder what Iceland, France and Sweden are thinking right now. Cologne is literally free for the taking for anyone who wants it, and is staring 3 empires in the face. Instead, the Bucks are likely to be the ones to steal it. So I will point out once again that they come from halfway across the fucking world. And we go back to the East Indies for some more warring action. I hope you guys keeping track of the city flips are having fun. Henry Parkes takes 4 cities off the Kimberley, but that doesn't look like it's going to last, considering how many ships, GWIs and planes Jandamara has in the region. There's going to be a lot of flipping happening here. Kendawal might go from 20 plus pop to 1 in this part though, which is a big hit to whoever ends up with it at the end. The Aussie Air Force has been busy, bombing Vegan down to the red and hitting the irrelevant city of Chongqing down to the yellow. As we wait for the Kimberley's turn to process so we can see them take back 3 or more cities, notice again how empty the Viet Corps is. The Trung sisters better get some more units, or they will actually be in some serious trouble. And they all flip back. The 4 cities the Aussies took in the previous part all end up back in Jandamara's hands. The dogfight for the outback is hotter than ever, with Junjuva down to the red for the Kimberley, and Bindyadanga at the very bottom of the slide down to the red for Parkes. Any city capture that Parkes makes will immediately be contested by Jandamara's ground and air troops. So from this point on, I find it hard to imagine any real progress getting done from either side. The only real hope is in the Kimberley Navy, which may be stomping through the Wobbegong. And now for something completely different. Here's a shot of a pile of Siberian forts in the snow, because what else can you do with snow tiles? Kuchum Khan does have a frightening navy, if he could get it somewhere where it could be useful. Then again, a significantly less frightening navy in Finland is right next door. F. King David is no more. While there is a chance that Jerusalem does flip back, if it does happen, then the next turn it will be permanently in Armenia's hands. In this battle royale, David could never really get off the ground. He settled a few cities and then lost Gaza early on, and never recovered. The only reason he wasn't put out of his misery multiple times by the Spartans was because Jerusalem was not coastal. As is, the armies of Mossad agents will live on, forever scouting the land for whoever cares to know what's out there. Back to North America, where the Inuit have a stranglehold on Yankton, despite it being at 0 health. The nearby infantry are nearly immune to cannon fire and block the way for the Texan GWI to get to the city. Somewhere in the previous couple turns, Panduranga, the Champan capital, flipped back purple, while Kothara went to the Viets. The lone Indonesian musket looks at the war-torn region, with the odd realization that his former homeland is actually the only part of this area that hasn't been obliterated by the Kimberley-Osoi-Viet Champan War. The former cities of Gajah Mada sit comfortably in Jandamarra's hands, perhaps the only part of the Kimberley Empire that is not currently besieged. Also in this slide, Burma, because that civ still exists in the game. The Wobbegong assault on the isolated Kimberley cities in the south is not exactly going well. Luma is the only one that is even threatened, though it looks like Wollongaro is poked a bit by that caravel. I hate to say it to all you Aussie fans and conspiracy theorists, but this is not the stomp that people have been expecting. The Wobbegong Armada is outdated in comparison to what Jandamarra has, and it is costing them big time. Henry Morgan finally relents and makes peace with Maria the Lazy, who gives up Goa and promptly goes to sleep in Cologne. This war has worn her out, and the midnight train to nowhere is calling. So, Henry, who's next? The other Indonesian unit, a scout in Eastern Europe, looks on as Leonidas takes Ohrid back. Indonesia must think that this world is going to hell, which it probably is, as everywhere they look there is carnage. Kumae is also looking close to falling, though Sweden only has one melee unit in the area, which is extremely low on HP. Oh dear, the Inuit have captured Quebec City. It will get flipped back immediately, but that is 13 population that will be lost in the blink of an eye. Furthermore, it looks like Regina and Charlottetown are in fairly firm control of the Inuit. I don't know if we'd seen this before, but Leicester does have machine guns. Hey, David's back. Not for long, but at least he's not giving up without a fight. Too bad that all his remaining units are missionaries which, last I checked, can't capture cities. Also relevant is the Hawaiian-Mexican peace that has been made. It does not look like Hawaii ended up with any cities in the deal, but it's hard to tell off camera. Another large pile of cities flipped down under once again, this time including Jinjuva and Vegan. I fully expect most of these to flip back after Jandamarra's turn processes, but do check out the submarine hanging out near Kandawal. That's bad news for an already outdated Aussie fleet. The Trung sisters are in big trouble here. They're being pressured heavily by the Wobbegong and have almost nothing that can recapture lost cities. I count exactly 2 units capable of doing so on this slide, none of which are anywhere near the places that need it. Vegan is pretty much done for, and if Henry Parkes focuses his air force on Hoi An, we could see a huge population city flip over to Australia. For the first time on the mainland, Jandamarra flips a city that was originally Australian, seizing Sunshine Coast, much to the dismay of an Aussie destroyer. Not actually sure whether that means Parkes has the tech for destroyers, or if his gigantic pile of privateers happened to capture a couple, but I suppose we shall see soon enough. Also flipping on this turn is Junjuva and probably another several East Indies cities. And it's official, David has been eliminated in 45th place. Armenia, now with some breathing room, has got to tech up ASAP, find a great scientist and bulb it or something. Your neighbors have GWI. Oh, and get bigger cities, please. The map makers have got to be busy right now, as multiple flips are happening per slide. They furiously scribble out the previous Inuit borders and replace them with Canadian borders, as Quebec City and Charlottetown have been claimed by Pearson. Worth noting that Canada only has 7 planes left, a paltry number compared to what they had at the beginning of this war, and 2 of them are sitting uselessly in Washington. Occasionally, someone does something useful. The polar vortex descends upon Maria's capital, forcing her advisors to do the unthinkable: wake her up. She rises groggily and asks, "Is it tomorrow yet?" Her advisors shake their heads and walk away, content to deal with the threat themselves. That being said, Cologne is going to be Icelandic in very short order, and their Moroccan allies have an easy grab at the one-tile island that is left in the Mediterranean. We could have a double elimination in this part, folks. As Ohrid and Cumae flip in the background, we see Sparta has decided to play nice and make peace with Maria. She loses 1 enemy but gains 2 in the meantime. Sparta secures Rome, but who knows how long that will last, with the Swedish threat continuing to barrel down towards their capital. The map makers continue to scribble as the Inuit capture 3 more cities, this time with helicopters. The Texan force around Yankton is disintegrating, and while the Canadian force is still strong numerically, they are vastly out-teched. I would not be surprised to see rocket artillery out of the Inuit here soon. Absolutely everything is going wrong for Vietnam, as Che Bongar takes back Kothara. There are no units anywhere nearby that can capture a city, something Viet Congs, and the Wobbegong is still barreling down on them. The Trung sisters need to peace out of the war right now if they want to have any hope at all. Wait, this isn't a war zone. What gives? We do see Mali in all its glory here, with musketmen, knights and Gatling guns as the primary units in the carpet. If the Boers even so much as sneezed on them, they'd probably lose 5 cities at this point. We also see the empty backcountry of Carthage in this picture, which is very DOW-able. Oh god, Paul Kruger is in the information era. I don't know what he's beelining to, but he's already got paratroopers and rocket artillery, so it could be the dreaded XCOM carpet. His core actually isn't particularly impressive, with no cities that really stand out as being amazing, but you can't argue with the tech lead he has on everyone else. 5 more cities flip as Australia takes its turn. The entire southern coast is Aussie once again, as is Junjuva and one of the Papuan cities. Jandamara looks to be able to take at least Junjuva and Kunmunya back, but do they have enough gas in the tank to get the others? Here's the mess of units around the East Indies, fighting over Papua New Guinea. There might just be too much Australian stuff for the Kimberley to hold out against. We shall see how things unfold though. Yankton finally flips back, but that isn't likely to last for long, as the Inuit have melee units sitting right there waiting to take it back. The Texan units are very sparse at this point. They need to bring up reinforcements if they don't want to risk losing more cities. The lovely Inuit Wait a second. Babylon has a spy named Ishtar? I understand everything now. They go to the opposing capital, find people named Steve, and then get them to do their bidding. It all makes sense. I don't understand that reference. I just reiterated it because that's what it says on the card. Anyway, the Inuit core is impressive and will be even more so after the Inuit finish the Pentagon in their capital. That pile of ships to the north of Ivavik is quite impressive as well. Hey, an excuse to look at Afghanistan. Yankton falls back to the ice blue of the Inuit. This wider view of the region shows just how much of a bite the Inuit have taken out of the Texan unit carpet. The Maori, who are at war with Texas in case anyone forgot, if so, how dare you, hang out in Uxmal and around the other old main city of Tikal. At least Texas is keeping up the image of fighting here. Also, say hello to the long-lost trireme and galleass of the Inuit. The Civ has destroyers and battleships, and here are two medieval vessels just hanging out. Aren't they cute? A quick look at Cologne, featuring a pair of corsairs playing the peacekeeper role we've seen throughout this BR. Iceland is going to have a tough time getting to the city, but have an easy run of it afterwards. Jandamara, please, for the love of God, upgrade your pikemen. I guess it's possible that he has no horses, but still, come on. Parks begins to push against the Kimberley capital of Rubibi. It's fairly well defended by planes, battleships, GWI and artillery, but that's exactly what they're facing off against from Australia, so we'll have to see how things go. Those planes are going to have to be the clutch here. The only reason Jandamara is still contesting this pretty well is because Australia needlessly decided to fight a two-front war. In a special World Congress meeting, Canada continues to be the next host of the shindig. If the Inuit had their way, they would make sure there wasn't even any Canada left after 18 turns, but there's still a lot to go, and Canada has added a few more planes to the front lines to help repel the glacial force. A quick shot of Hawaii, where TPang graciously shows us that the Inuit are plotting against Kamehameha. It must be those mind-controlled Steves, but we all know how unreliable they can be. Worth noting that the peace treaty between Mexico and Hawaii did not cause any cities to change hands. Waipahu was the lone casualty of that war. Well, millions upon millions of casualties, but still. While Merida lost a lot of population. Grumble, grumble, Viet Cong, grumble, grumble. This is exactly the scenario I warned of in one of the threads last week about the Viet Cong. The Viets lost a coastal city to ships and only have units on the ground, none of which are capable of taking cities. They do have a nearby ironclad which could help out if it survives the next turn, which it may or may not end up doing. They do also have a lancer up in Vegan, but unless Australia has already taken its turn, it's unlikely that will survive. Here we see the northern border of Vietnam, where deep within the mountains exists the last stronghold of Mao. Said stronghold has seen its borders shrink drastically as of late, after the Mongol Khans decided that Mao's lands tasted good. Surely Mao is plotting his revenge, Mao-niacally petting a cat, and dreaming up devious plots to rid the world of his enemies. Wait, does this mean proletariat Cossack is back? Carthage makes progress against Cairo, which looks sure to fall next turn against an overwhelming Punic presence. In the meantime, Ethiopia still hasn't DOW'd the Ayyubids, instead deciding to give them the middle finger with citadels. I guess one sacrifices one unit for a few tiles, while the other sacrifices a bunch, so that kinda makes sense? Hashtag just AI things. La Rioja takes damage, as it looks like Eva Perón is basically out of units, with only a cannon and an out-of-place rifleman to defend her. She likely won't be eliminated in this part, but next time you can all prepare your Fs. In other news, Chile is staging a naval invasion that is going pretty well, pretty much securing Vitkos and hitting... oh dear. Corihuayrachina and Tiwanaku to the yellow. Why do you have to have such weird fucking city names, Inca? Seriously. This looks like Mark 1 all over again. Cairo has fallen. Hannibal turns his units toward Aswan, as the Ayyubid capital is in Punic hands. One lone Hawaiian crossbowman watches the carnage. And the other capital lost goes to Vietnam, capturing Panduranga back from the Champa. They also managed to get Vegan back from Australia with the hero Lancer from a few slides back. It even looks like the Lancer has a buddy, so perhaps there is hope. One thing is for sure, the number of submarines that Vietnam has will put any naval invasion to an immediate halt, which is exactly what it looks like has happened. Australia's navy is nowhere to be found, and perhaps Vietnam may have a chance to counterattack. The first truly painful city for the Kimberley to lose falls to the yellow, as the 27 population Kalamburu takes heavy airplane/artillery fire. There are a lot of Kimberley planes in the region, as well as ships and Great War infantry, but they absolutely do not want to lose that city if at all possible. Considering that Kimberley goes immediately after Australia, and it is neither of their turns, it is hard to imagine them holding Kalamburu past next turn. Hey, we've got info addict slides this time. The Boers lead the way in population with a fairly staggered top 10. Surprisingly, Hawaii is still a part of it, even after losing the 25+ population city of Waipahu. Massive amounts of production exist for Sabir, as they lead the way by a ton. Note who isn't on this list: Jandamarus Kimberley. A surprising showing for the Snoryaks as well, who we did not get a chance to see in this part, beating out the Inuit by exactly 1 million tons. Sabir and the Inuit tied atop the city leaderboard, with Australia close behind and the rest way back. And we see our city-states down here, with the newly crowned city-state of Argentina and soon-to-be city-state of Portugal. The Ayubids are not long for this world either. Despite the Boers being the first to information era, they are actually tied atop this list with the Inuit, with 65 techs apiece. We didn't get much of a shot of the Boers this part, but I wonder what they've skipped to get all the way up here, or rather, what did they beeline to? The Boers have a huge lead in military manpower here, most likely because of their tech level comparatively, as well as the fact that they aren't spending any of it in war. Jandamara is still on this list, but Vietnam is completely absent. Together they might still have a chance at fighting off the Aussies, especially with the submarine force Vietnam has, if only they could actually capture cities. A peek at the religion screen, where we have a nice X across the Israelite Empire name. RIP. Not only did they lose their final cities, but they also lost the religion lead. And here's the religion map, which brings us to the end of this part. Thanks so much to TPang for letting me do this bloody part. I hope to be invited to do more of these in the future, but in the meantime I will go back to lurking and cheering on my faves. RIP Philippines, your glorious subreddit will be missed. If you've got any comments on my writing, I wrote a lot, suggestions, feedback, or questions about really obscure references I threw. Actually, I do have questions regarding some of those really obscure references you threw out, mate. So please, if you have any of those things, let him know on the subreddit. Night of Nye. Until next time.